Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Baltzley, and I'm an organizational development consultant with Continuity Consulting. And we're going to have a little fun here. We're going to be talking about creating a pocket of greatness. You know, leadership is fundamentally a subversive act. If you think about it, it's about forming a resistance against accepting the lowest common denominator. It's the idea of kind of pushing against the status quo, the way things are. It's kind of being able to cast a vision for the way things could be and to take your team, to move your unit, your division, your organization from here to there. Now, this particular conference is about government transformation. It's supposed to be a stimulus toward government transformation. And government transformation is both a lofty and a huge goal, isn't it? And even though large sweeping changes are indeed needed, what we want to talk about today is we want to talk about, the question we have before us today is how does a well-intentioned, hardworking leader build and sustain healthy culture and high performance within their particular sphere of influence? First of all, before we get too far, I want to address a couple things. One, I want to address a question that you may have and kind of make an upfront acknowledgement. The first is the question, what do we mean by pocket of greatness? So what we mean by pocket of greatness is, first of all, a pocket of greatness is about achieving business results. It's about fulfilling your mission. It's about making a decisive impact with the resources you have. It's also about human flourishing for those involved. It's about personal and professional development. It's about teamwork, collaboration. It's about creating the opportunity for meaningful work and positive relationships. Now, for example, if we're in this first square here where we're neither achieving business results nor contributing to the human flourishing of the people that we lead, God help us. We can all agree there's really no place for that. Well, what about if we go after business results and really just kind of ignore the needs and the people that work for us and the people that we lead? Well, we want to say that that's unsustainable because healthy, high-performing organizations don't fall from the sky and they don't rise up out of the ground. People build them. Well, what about if we create a kind of a people-friendly environment for people to work in, and we put the business results on the back burner? Well, the problem with this is ultimately we may enjoy what we do, but in the end, we're going to be disappointing people because we're going to not be fulfilling the mandate and the mission that we have. So when it comes to creating a pocket of greatness, we believe a pocket of greatness is a both and. It has a dual aim, both the business results and creating the opportunity for the human flourishing for those that are involved. And one thing that we're going to see, we're going to have a panel up here in a few minutes. And one of our panelists will affirm this too, is that we really believe that within the public sector, in public sector leadership, that really this is really the only way that you can lead in a strategic and sustainable way. So, upfront acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge right up front that there are constraints. Some of them are huge. Some of you face huge constraints and you have many obstacles in your way. But we believe that most of those constraints, they can be either overcome or outsmarted. And so we want you today to kind of make a commitment, and we want to challenge you to push forward and until you've really put these steps that we're going to give you and tried to put them into practice, that to just continue to have hope that you can do it. So here we go. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at creating a pocket of greatness. And the first thing we're going to look at is the leadership paradigm necessary to create that pocket of greatness. Then we're going to look at the practices that you can use to build a healthy, high-performing team within a larger organization. Then we're going to introduce you to our panel of greatness, and then we're going to talk about the risks and rewards of embarking on such a challenge.
Well, good morning. I'm Keith Aldridge with Continuity Consulting. I want everyone to imagine for a moment the best team you've ever been a part of. It may have been a part of a public sector team, it may have been a sports team. But imagine, what are the words that come to your mind as you're thinking about this? How would you describe it to someone else? Well, I imagine if I could collect all the thought bubbles over everyone's head, we'd see something like this. Actually, these words are from a recent client engagement as we asked them, what does high performing look like to you? We'd probably see things like effective communication, leadership, teamwork, collaboration. We all know what we're looking for in a high-performing team, in a healthy culture, but oftentimes we have challenges. But I think we could all agree that if we could sustain this on a daily basis, that would become a pocket of greatness. And so one of the things I'd like to encourage, I know we have some very senior and seasoned leaders here, and this may actually describe your organization and your team, and I applaud you, because I know how much work goes into creating organizational health. And so hopefully today it serves for you as just encouragement to keep fighting the good fight for creating healthy, high-performing organizations. If this doesn't reflect your team on an ongoing basis, that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about what are the paradigms involved and the practices that lead to it. And then we're going to hear from our panel because they exemplify, they embody the principles that we're going to be discussing. So let's jump into and talk about the leadership paradigm. We act out of our paradigms. And as Chris talked about, heaven forbid we create an organization that doesn't deliver any results and is also toxic for our people. But we think there's a better way. But that starts with our paradigm. What do we believe about people? What do we believe about motivation? What do we believe about performance? And so we have to take time to step back and evaluate what are our paradigms about leadership and take time to get clarity on that so that we can lead from a position and a foundation of kind of clear assumptions about where we're going. So one of the things we talk about when we work with our clients is kind of these two guiding principles that we try to get leaders to embody. One starts with intentionality. Anything we want to do, any type of personal growth, transformation, or change, or whether it's on an organization-wide level, starts with someone deciding that they're going to be intentional. We're not going to transform organizations by hoping or even being cynical about the issues that we're really facing. And so it starts with an idealistic intentionality for the organization we want to build. The next thing on there you'll see is make no assumptions. And the reason we put it up there is, oftentimes well-intentioned leaders start to make assumptions about everyone must think like me. Everyone must be motivated like me. They share my values. And oftentimes this is where some of the disconnect comes. And so we need to step back and think about, how are we different? What are our unique strengths? And make sure that there's clarity on our team. Also, oftentimes what we see is with younger leaders, they'll jump to trying to solve a problem. And they don't validate the assumptions and what is the real root cause of the problem we're trying to solve. And then the one I like the most actually often comes from our brightest leaders and the most motivated. And they're like, I said it once. I put out a memo. We had a staff meeting. Why doesn't everyone get it like I do? And it just takes time. And you'll get sick of it. And you'll hear from one of our panelists, as we've talked about this with her, is, she gets it, she understands it, she's maybe even communicated things a dozen times, but still realizes she has to come back to the basics and not assume that everyone's on board with her. And that's a ball she has to keep pushing uphill. So, the second paradigm, clarifying your leadership point of view. This is actually a concept that came from Ken Blanchard, and we work with our clients about getting clarity about who you are. What are your assumptions? What are your core values? What are your non-negotiables? And then taking the time when you understand what it is you stand for as a leader, and then making sure that that is then communicated. Do people understand your expectations of them, and what you expect of them, and what they can expect of you? And so that's one of the things that we're getting clarity on that, taking time, stepping back, and Chris will talk about a little bit about communicating that, but making sure we've taken the time to do that work. The next thing we want to touch on and we'll be exploring with our panel is this idea that leaders that want to create a pocket of greatness really adopt a destination orientation. And what do I mean by that? Well, they become results focused, they become outcomes oriented, and they have an idea where they want to take their team. They don't allow their team to flounder. And one of the things that this will do is when you do become results focused and outcome oriented, you kind of have an idealistic and preferred future. And I know that sounds risky, and anyone that's been at this a long time, it's easy to become jaded. It's easy to become cynical. And as Chris said, though, we want to push back against all the obstacles and the reasons why we can't get something done and look towards what is possible. What is the possibility? Because if it's not you that's creating that ideal preferred future, where is it going to come from? Where will transformation come from? So the answer lies in the team, the people that are sitting here, is that we start to become idealistic about where we want to bring our team to. This does a couple of things actually for us. We're not talking about, broad just vision casting. When we have a very distinct goal, it helps us in a couple of areas. First, when we have setbacks, which we will, it gives us a mindset of how do we overcome our obstacles in light of our destination versus who should I blame for the problem that just arose. And the second thing is it gives us a mindset for the long haul around perseverance. And one of the things we'll talk about is with our panelists is this is a marathon. I mean, leadership is an exhausting effort about pushing back against the status quo. So you can't look at it in 30-day increments. You have to look at it as a long-term initiative of change. The next thing we're going to look at, so now you've kind of set your plan. Leaders need to walk the talk and model the way. There's a saying that people will first follow the person, then they'll follow the plan. So the question becomes, what kind of leader are you setting out to be, and what kind of model are you creating around your destination? And I was recently talking to one of the state executives as we were even preparing for this and talking about effective leadership in public sector. And she was sharing with me how she evaluates effective leaders. And one of the things she said, it's like turning off or hitting the mute button on your TV at home. And when you do that, you can still get the plot line. You can still see who the heroes are, and you can still understand who the villains are in the story. And so the question becomes, if someone hit the mute button on you, what would be the story that was told? And so I think we have to think about that as leaders, that we have to go first. We have to be courageous and vulnerable and set the tone for the rest of the team. The last point I want to make is if you're going through the effort to create a pocket of greatness, as a leader, part of our job and the paradigm that we should have is we need to protect the pocket. Just like in football, the team's job is to create a safe place for the quarterback to operate. Well, you as the leader have to create a safe place. You've been playing the quarterback and setting the destination, the vision, but are you creating that place? Are you now becoming the lineman? Are you blocking in things that are coming in that could make your team less effective? For example, this may require you to patiently lead up the organization, to protect the team, whether it be from distractions or even distractions and negativity. Or it also may require you to protect that team by creating, one of the things we heard was common standards. Treat everyone the same. And what happens is oftentimes leaders lose credibility with their team when they give a workload of 5x to their high performers, right? No good deed goes unpunished. And then someone else is allowed to sit over here and play solitaire because they don't want to have an uncomfortable situation and they don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation. So one of the things you have to do is protect the pocket and protect your team and allow them and empower them to do good work. And so with that, I'm going to bring up Chris here in a second. But as we think about this, it all starts with our paradigm. And as we talk with our panel, they're going to share their paradigm of leadership and what they have done in their own unique way to create a pocket of greatness in their organization. So now, for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to turn over to Chris, and he's going to talk about the practices. How do we take paradigm and move into action?
Do you like our tag team? Is it working? Okay, we're going to talk a bit about the practices that will help you build a healthy and high-performing team within a larger organization. And to follow up with where Keith is at, practice is about communicating your leadership point of view. Keith talked about how it's important to step back and to clarify who you are as a leader, how you view your staff, the kind of way, the expectations you have for them, what they can expect from you as a person and as a leader. Well, then you need to make a plan. The next step is to make a plan to communicate and display that. And it's not a one-time event. And our panel is going to get into that a little more, so we're going to go on to practice number 2. Practice number 2 is define your pocket. And the first way you define your pocket, it's similar to the image you see on the slide. Think of 3 concentric circles and you're standing in the middle. That first smallest circle around you is what you have control over. It's your span of responsibility. And it really begins with you. And the things that we're talking about today, really, that most of them fit in that circle. They're within your control. They're within your span of responsibility. The next circle out is what you have influence over. And this may be your team, and there may be other things that you have a great amount of influence over. And then the outside circle is what you have concern for, or maybe you worry about. Maybe it's legislation that might pass, or something that you really have no control over, you have no influence on, but it's in that outer circle. And my point really is, it's helpful to define where the different activities that you're involved in, the different aspects of your world, where they fit, and to decide, I'm going to focus on the things I have control and influence over. I'm not going to worry about the things that I don't have control over. We need to start with those things. So that's the first point. I'm sorry, let me go back because I wasn't quite done with that. The second way we protect our pocket is we not only know our spheres, but we know our business. It's important for you to know, to not just be siloed and not just be focused on the operations of what you do, but to be focused, to know your business plan, to know where it fits within the larger system. So that's how we define our pocket. The next practice is establish staff digestible strategic clarity, which is not the easiest phrase to say. One of our panelists, Randy, is going to come up a little bit later, and he's going to help us understand the concept of staff digestible. But what we really mean here is we're not, you can probably guess, we're not talking about the strategic plan that gets created and posted to the website that really doesn't affect the day-to-day activities. It doesn't affect the regular decisions that need to be made on a day-to-day basis. We're talking about really having some clear statements about why you exist as a team, why you exist as a division, having some clear value statements that say, this is how we behave around here. And these things, use these things as guiding principles. It's important for your team to know from top to bottom, what is the top priority for us for the next 9 to 12 months? This is the kind of things we're talking about. So that's what we kind of mean by getting clarity. And so when we start to, as you can see, as we're moving this way, as we take these steps and begin to put these things into practice, we've clarified our leadership point of view, and then we've got a plan for communicating it. We've defined our pocket, our sphere of control and influence, and we're getting strategic clarity, and we're bringing our team on board. Well, you can imagine this has given us focus, right? And what's going to happen as we get focused and we're moving forward is there's going to be some things that emerge that need to change. So practice number 4 really has to do is what happens when we see the need for change. So when we see the need for change, we need to make sure that we're addressing root causes. And to kind of illustrate this, I'd like to put a framework over it of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a leader triangle. And if you take a look at this, we often have leaders come to us who they can see visible symptoms of something's wrong. And that's what you see at the top of the pyramid. They see that they're not getting the results that they want. They aren't able to hold people accountable. And they come to us and they say, hey, guess what? We have a problem. I want to get better results. But the thing is what you need to understand is there are underlying root causes that cause this to happen. So as you see, like in this situation, that there's possibility of an absence of trust. And that absence of trust has led to a fear of conflict over strategic goals and direction. Well, so because there hasn't been that conflict allowed or it hasn't happened, there's no commitment, there's no buy-in. So then what do you have? You have the visible symptoms of no accountability and a lack of results. So we have to make sure and address root causes. Well, so how do we get to these root causes? Well, the first option is to ignore them and press on. But as you know, what you don't see can sink you. So that's not a good option. So how do we get to them? How do we get to these root causes? Well, first of all, I want to say we need to assess. And for us as an organization, we've developed an organizational health and effectiveness survey. And the only reason that we developed this was because we kept coming against this again and again, where you have great intuitive leaders who feel something, but they need data. And so the thing with the assessment is it allows you to kind of get down to those root causes. And I want to encourage you to, however you get to assessing, that you choose to find ways to assess. Because however intuitive you are, you need more weapons than just your gut. So first of all, we assess. That's step one. The second is we listen. We ask good questions. We listen well. We follow up. So like even for us, when we do assessments, we do these surveys, we go in and do follow-up interviews. We sit one-on-one, face-to-face. And this is really the only way that we get to why. That we get to why things are the way they are. And it's really often where the solutions emerge out of. Like, for example, Keith earlier showed the word cloud. These are people who said, the best team I was ever on was like this. So what do those things become? Those things become goals for our team. So it's in that listening well and being able to ask questions of open-ended questions of how might we? How might we do this? How might we solve this problem? And the best thing a leader can do is actually follow up on the things that they've begun and the questions they've started. So the next thing we do, the next step is to learn. And this is a very mature step for a leader. And really, to be honest, as an organization even, we're really trying to move this way and trying to learn better. Because what we need to learn to do is to distinguish between technical problems and adaptive challenges. And I'm going to show you a little chart here, but I'm not going to talk about the chart. So you can read over my shoulder. But what I'm going to tell you is a little story. Just imagine you've got someone working for you. You've just promoted them. Their name is Dan. Dan has done a great job, very hardworking, but you do an assessment. Maybe there's a 360 appraisal on Dan, and you find out Dan, he doesn't delegate very well. So what do? You sit down with Dan. You have a heart-to-heart talk. Dan's real earnest. He's hardworking. Well, if this is a technical problem, you send Dan to a half-day training program. He's just been promoted, right? He's never been in this role before. He adapts these new things he's learning about delegation, and voila, 3 months later, Dan's delegating. Well, but if this is more than just a technical problem, if it's an adaptive challenge, you sit down with Dan, he's earnest, he wants to do the right thing, you send him to half-day training, you follow up 3 months later, feedback's the same. Dan's still not delegating. Well, I want to suggest that maybe Dan's not just ignorant or apathetic. It's possible there's more going on there. Well, it just so happens that Dan comes from a hard-working, blue-collar family. And they never really understood what management did in all those meetings and conference calls. And Dan kind of has always had the value of, hey, if you want it done right, you do it yourself. Well, Dan has values and assumptions that need to be challenged and they need to be altered if he's going to be successful. That's an adaptive challenge. And it's true for organizations as well. Sometimes there's beliefs, assumptions, ways of working that need to be addressed, that need to change, and people need to be involved in finding the new way. And maybe there's experimentation that needs to go on in order for the new way to be found. That's an adaptive challenge. So, what we want to suggest is that, you may believe that your good intentions and your energy are going to sustain your work. But we want to suggest that it's having the right leadership paradigm and doing the right practices that are going to sustain your good intentions and your energy. And now we're going to invite our panel of greatness to come up, and we're going to grill these people. Are you guys ready? We're going to ask them really personal questions they weren't expecting, and I'm going to go ahead and switch this mic. So here we are with our panel of greatness. First of all, we have Randy Deems, Chief Deputy Director, Department of Housing and Community Development. We have Christine Rodriguez, Assistant Deputy Director of Labor and Human Resources Management at CAL FIRE. And we have Amber Barnett, who's Chief of Community Reentry Services at CDCR. Can we welcome them? They are very brave individuals who had no idea the room was going to be this large or that they were going to be filmed. So you must give them a lot of grace. But we have some questions for them. Okay, first of all, we just want you to know, as Keith reiterated earlier, as he mentioned earlier, that we have these people here because they come from different parts of government, and they have different experiences, different personalities, but they really do reflect the things that we're talking about. And one of the reasons that we didn't illustrate all the things we're saying is because they do. And even if we don't get to all these different things today, I encourage you to engage them in conversation. So first of all, Randy, you're up first. We must admit that we borrowed the phrase staff digestible, borrowed from you. How did you come up with that phrase, and what do you mean by that?
Well, first, if you stole it from me, you're stealing it twice, most likely. I think staff digestible, and one thing I want to say about that is staff means everybody. There's no rank and file and management distinction there. Staff is everyone. In fact, I have an example of senior level indigestion on a recent effort. But really, it's about how do you make your message, if you're trying to create that pocket and that culture, how do you make it accessible? How do you make it so that people get it? Don't be afraid. It's sort of a marketing effort. Don't be afraid to try to make it catchy. It's got to be short, concise, to the point. Even if you expand on it, you need to have the pieces. Thanks for putting that up. You need to have the pieces explained. But you need to have the high level, no jargon, to the point. So in this example, you can see, you don't need to see the detail, but you see 4 major sort of points, and you see words that we see all the time as values in organizations: integrity, competence, performance, and service. Those are our 4 big themes. But what we really strive for in this example to make it more digestible is we actually explain in the real world and what you do every day, what do those words mean? And we called those principles of operation, which actually I stole from someone who used to work for you guys, Dennis Dearbaugh. So I think that's the key. How do you make it so it's digestible? A more recent example, I did something very similar, did all those things, except the format was a memo to all staff. And that is a situation where a year later I found there were even some senior management that didn't digest it because they opened it and it was too long. It had the catchy stuff, it had the guiding principles that explained it, but it didn't fit on one sheet. So those things hang in cubicles and they're there. You can repeat them and see them easily. And so I think that's a key. You got to make sure you don't put together some long strategic plan that ends up on someone's shelf or on the intranet somewhere and no one looks at. So what is it that you can get in front of people, reinforce, over-communicate to make it actually stick?
Yeah, and you guys went through a process to get this, in a sense, from your head all the way to where it really onto paper and then kind of became part of culture, right? Right. So what happened was, this was when I was the Deputy Director for Administration at HCD, where I am now. And I was about 2 years in, and what I had done after 1 year
is I asked my branch chiefs to do a probation report on me. Tell me what I did well, what I need to work on. And they did that the first time, a little tentatively, but they did it. And I got some good things out of that. And then the second year, I asked them to do it again. Now I need an annual performance report. Tell me what are the things. And one of the key things that came out of there is they said, you keep asking us to do certain things a certain way. What are you looking for? What is the vision? And so the consistency of what I was asking was indicating to them that there was a destination
Orientation.
And so when I got that, I said, okay, so how do I define that? Yeah, no, there is something I'm going for. What is it? And that's where I started to, how do I make that digestible? How do you make it simple? And I had those 4 things. And I said, well, yeah, people hear that all the time. And that's where we then worked with the management team and staff to come up with what does that mean to us? And this is going to be a set of principles of operation that we stick to. And so essentially, what my answer was, not that I had the strategic plan, but I had the vision of what organization I wanted, what that pocket of greatness that is really what I was looking for. So there's 100 people, pocket of greatness. So that came the next step. How do you get it out there? So it started with an all-staff meeting, tried to make it as catchy as possible. We had the pyramid, and we also, although I didn't steal it, and I don't think you stole it from me, I had the water come up on this floating iceberg again. And I don't know that you can read it on the slide, but this says integrity, competence, performance, and service at the top. The root cause of what was causing problems in administration, which is common across state government, would be that I had great integrity. I had good people. They knew their stuff. Admin typically knows what they're doing, but the strategy really was in how we do it. They had the integrity, they had the competence. For the most part, we had great performance. The breakdown was in our service. Just inherently, the model in admin, especially in state government, creates friction. It's the difference of masters, right? Control agencies versus trying to get things done at a very high level. But so service was our root problem. And so we communicated that service was key. And so what we did from there then to make it really ingrained in the organization is that we had to measure and show that that was important. So some of the things that we did is, we kicked off at that first all-staff, we said the next one, we're gonna do a service survey and just very simple, ask your customers, what's the degree of service and the degree of partnership you feel with this unit? And it was consistent with this. So we need to measure. If you don't measure what you're looking for, people won't act and change their behavior to align with it. And so we did that, and that was really compelling. The next year, you're sitting in the all-staff meeting. We did it at the end, and the second you say, here are our results, everyone sits up. I want to see that. Even the nappers, if you've ever, you know who they are.
You guys don't know any nappers, do you?
They wake up and pay attention. And so every communication, everything we did reinforced these principles. They knew I was accountable to them. I was going to hold the management accountable to it and hold them accountable to it in a positive way. And eventually, I mean, truly exceptional division, the acronym was TED. Why is service so important to TED? I mean, we played with that a lot, and it became part of the culture and the vernacular of the division. People would say to each other, that wasn't very TED, right? And so it just got ingrained because of the repetition and that we actually measured by it.
Thank you, Randy. That's good. And you can see Randy has a lot more to say about that.
I do. I'm
if you want to
sorry.
follow him up. That's very good. Christine, I have a question for you. Part of being intentional and not making assumption is getting close to the situation. What have you done to keep yourself and your staff close to the situation?
Well, you know admin work is very mysterious. And when you're in admin, even what your counterparts do is very mysterious. And then you add human resources that has a locked door that no one can get in. How do you get people to know what you do, and how do you get to know what your programs do, more importantly? And so I have developed a culture of getting out to the field and seeing what people do. Now, working for CAL FIRE, you know, they put out fires, but it's just not that simple. On one of the larger fires, one of the state's largest fires, the Rim Fire a couple years ago at Yosemite, we took a group of staff out to the fire. And you can see by these pictures the pallets and pallets and pallets of food. And one of the questions were, is that the food for the day? And the unit chief kind of chuckled a little bit and said, that would be for lunch. And it really created an understanding of the volume. You hear that there's 5,000 firefighters on the line, but what does that mean when you're purchasing the food for them, or you're trying to process a purchase order for an item that they need? And it just brings what they do into reality. You might already know it, but it brings it. And then by having the field and the staff, they get to smell the fire, they get to smell the smoke, they get to see the hands-on work, and it just makes it a little bit more real to not only the administration staff, but it also brings that the fact is that administration is really there to support the field. And that's really critical, is understanding to know what your field does. A couple of other things is basics, getting back to basics, is walking around and knowing who your staff are. Understanding that you have your path as you walk, as you get to the office, and you say good morning and good day to those people that you see. But what about Pam, who sits in the back of the office? When do you talk and check in with her? And so going to those far-reaching offices and having those conversations. How was the vacation? Just the basics of management. And one of the other things that I really want to focus on is the day of technology, and having meetings that are conference calls and meetings that are Skype. We all have them, and our schedules are just packed with meetings. But how important is it to be there on a face-to-face meeting? It's much easier to call in and make that call. You can multitask during the call. You can get a lot of work done. But there's a lot of things that you're missing as a manager when you do call in. There's always the stuff that happens before and after the meetings. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff that actually goes on with sign language and facial expressions and body language during the meeting that you're not privy to when you're on that conference line. So just really taking a step back and, yes, using the tools of technology to help us, but at the same time, taking the time to have those face-to-faces, because there's nothing more important than seeing somebody and having, hey, follow up with them on something that they maybe talked to you about a week before. It's just that connection and not making the assumptions.
Okay, thank you, Christine. We have a picture of Christine as well that we want to show you. Christine, tell us about this picture. You stole this where?
This was with one of my tours down in San Luis Obispo, and why this was so important, and I showed a picture of myself instead of my staff out in the field, is at this point of my going out to the field, I had seen about 50 different fire stations up and down the state of California at this point when I was down in San Luis Obispo. So I felt pretty comfortable that I knew all the different variety of fire stations, the makeup of the stations. And then I went to San Luis Obispo, and we actually are the fire department for the airport there, and which creates a whole new training for these people, creates a whole new dynamic. And as you can see, this is not your traditional fire truck. And so just when I thought I had it, and I understood it, and I knew what the program did, I was surprised by this whole new program that I didn't even know existed until I visited the field and saw and talked to the captain who is responsible for this truck. So, very educational.
Thank you. Okay, Amber, you're up. When you first came to Community Reentry Services from Healthcare Services, you were given an organizational health and effectiveness assessment report that we created for your senior leadership before you got there. Was that helpful to you, or how was it helpful to you?
When I first, is my mic on? Okay. When I first rolled up to the game, I was that young leader who was really excited to roll my sleeves up and jump in. And there was a great amount of emotion, and those emotions ranged from extreme confusion, blame, a lot of anger, and the organizational assessment really provided the clarity on what was working well. The great news is we were all there for the same reason, the same purpose, for the parolees and the people that we serve. So that was well understood, and we can all agree upon that that was our main goal. We got to the root cause of problems that needed to be addressed. Was it really just the staff that was the issue? We really identified that there was social dysfunction at all levels, and we couldn't just point the finger to one area. We also knew that the members were previously part of a healthy, highly efficient, highly functioning teams, and they knew what it looked like, but they also knew that we didn't have it. So that was really important. And the assessment really allowed me to sort through the opinions, begin to assess the abilities of the staff, ask specific clarifying questions, which really helped me realize I needed a roadmap, I needed a guide. I had a lot of ideas in my head, but where exactly where we're going? And quite frankly, where was the quickest exit from where this team bus kind of broke down in the land of chaos? How could we get out quick?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, and now there's a picture we have of, that we wanted to show of Amber, that was on her, I believe on her door, in her room.
It's her Be the Change.
Yeah.
Can we bring it up?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Tell us a little, just briefly about this sign. You kind of inherited us. We walked in, you saw this, we saw this sign. What's the background for this?
So having the organizational assessment, there was a real common theme after meeting with each of the staff members individually, and there was just this pervasive victim mentality. Staff had no sense of power and no sense of ability to participate in their own destiny, their own careers, their own future. And so I really just needed a simple, quick call to action and something we could repeat over and over and over again, not some big, long, convoluted mission statement, but be the change. We have a pervasive gossip issue. How can you, as an individual, fix it? What can you do in your individual cubicle, in your office? How can you start to be the change? Don't participate in the gossip. And so it was just an immediate, free, we already had all the office supplies, a way to kind of get the message out there.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a ton of questions to ask these guys, but I want to get right to kind of the risk and reward. So when you embark on such a challenge of trying to create a pocket of greatness, how have you experienced, what risks, what rewards have you experienced? Anyone, just speak right up.
Okay, I'll go. One of the major risks I found for myself is just running the risk of burnout. You guys talked about it being a marathon, not a sprint. And putting in the hard work to do your leadership point of view, to get to know yourself as a leader, to get feedback from your team. Putting in that work when things get hectic, it provides that default guide, and it allows you to avoid detours on your roadmap, and you really just get back to the basics. And the reward, quite frankly, is commitment and raising the bar, raising the expectations, and getting buy-in and succeeding, getting results and the accountability you're really looking for.
Thank you, Amber.
And sometimes to do that, you have to challenge the status quo. And that's difficult, especially I've always done it this way, bureaucracy. But when you've done that, you have to really, when you're challenging that status quo, there's going to be some resistance. And you want to know when you're to ride that wave of resistance and keep kind of stepping back and moving forward, or changing your path, and not letting the peers bring you down, and kind of really focusing on what is your end result and what is it that you're trying to do, and taking that step back and, like I said, riding that wave. Is it time to maybe just coast a little bit, or is it time to maybe push forward a little bit, swim a little harder, and work upstream so that you can make those changes and lead by that example, and not without the burnout?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a huge issue.
Thank you, Christine.
So for me, the risk certainly is if you have the risk of falling on your face or not being able to finish something that you start. Is the organization going to come along? And the thing is that often no one's pushing us really hard to push that envelope on culture. It's often, don't screw up. And if you embody that, and then your organization is going to keep their head down. They're going to be focused on not screwing up. So on the benefit side, is that if you can create a pocket of greatness within the culture and the situation that we work within in government, where we don't have many carrots and sticks, that you can create something great and you walk away with, I mean, almost all of us work in an area where we're helping people who would otherwise not be served somehow, which is a rewarding thing. And so a big part of the benefit to me is to walk away doing work that I'm proud of and making a difference. And when I sort of thought about that and why I do what I do and why I work for the state, I thought about, you know, that's really one of the most important tools that we have as leaders for adding something to the paychecks. We don't give people bonuses. We don't have a whole lot of sticks. We don't have IPOs where people can get rich, so they're going to work, you know, night and day for you. So I think it's important to realize that that benefit of having a challenging and rewarding workplace and being part of a team that people can be proud of and helping people is a very important part of retaining your good people. It's part of their paycheck. And for us to focus on that and make sure that that's there for people is leadership. And that's a big part of what we need to focus on.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you can see, I mean, we called them up here because they embody what we're talking about. And is one of the things we talked about is this kind of idealism and, hold on, I got to get where we are. This idea of idealism as well as grit. And so I want to leave you on this quote as you head out here today and go build your pocket of greatness. This is from Patrick Lencioni. It says, "The impact of organizational health goes far beyond the walls of the organization, extending to customers, vendors, and even spouses and children. It sends people to work in the morning with clarity, hope, and anticipation, and brings them home at night with a greater sense of accomplishment, contribution, and self-esteem. And for the leaders who spearhead those efforts, it'll be one of the most rewarding and meaningful endeavors they'll ever pursue." And I think these, Randy, Christine, and Amber embody that, and I know there's probably many of you do as well. So please go build a pocket of greatness. Thank you.